that the methodology used in Belarus is fully in line with international standards. Belarus has established a quality recording of children development and use high quality administrative data covered the entire children population age of 59 months. The administrative data contain all anthropometric characteristics for each children aligned to ID. We provide WHO with a microdata based for one health facility to demonstrate the structure of the administrative data. The difference in our and WHO result was insignificant, but given that national data are of high quality and characterized by 100 coverage, we insist the use of national data. However, there is still no consensus on these issues. WHO still does not expect national data as the main sources. The indicator 3.6.1 death rate to road traffic injuries for Belarus, the indicator values are overestimate compared to national estimate, despite the fact that according to the WH methodology, Belarus belongs to a group of countries with good health registration data, and overestimation is applied for the Republic of Belarus. Even higher than the certain country, they do not have health registration data in place. These issues is still unresolved. In this regarding, we call on WH to revisit its practice to work in the field of monitoring progress of SDGs. The experience of our cooperation has shown that WHO does not have full information on data, ways, and methods of their calculation and processing. In this regard, we believe that for further effective interaction with NSO, it will be useful for WHO to develop and distribute among NSO questionnaire survey, which would help WHO raise events on the availability of certain data from a National Statistical Office. This would be simplify the data validation process and reduce the time spent by national counterparts on validating the data. I would like to take this opportunity to note that Belstat is open for cooperation and joint work on all issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you don't mind, I'd like to collect more questions and then, okay, Sweden?
Norway.
Okay.
We've always been mixed up. That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Steve, for some very good reflections about what I think is the biggest common project we've had in the statistical community at any time. Just before I came here, I met with the Norwegian representative to the CBD, Coming Montreal Nature Agreement ad hoc technical group, who's working on indicators for that agreement. And they divided it into headline indicators to the binary indicators, and then they have some complementary and component indicators which are not adopted, but these are meant for different levels of monitoring, where the headline indicators are for the global level. So I was just thinking, I think I learned something from our process in doing this, and I'm just asking whether we should also think about lessons learned from this big project that we have. And I'm not sure if it's too early, but I mean, we should also do it well ahead of the next agenda of the UN, so we know where to start and how to be present at the right time. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. I saw a girl. I mean, yeah, yes, please. The lady, thank you. And
Thank you. Yesterday we presented SDG 16, and I wanted to say and fully support Steve that there's a lot of success and shortcomings maybe, but for us and the goal 16 on governance, it was a major push to have this agenda, because my colleague from SHR will add, at some point it was almost an insult to talk about human rights in the statistical community. The SDG gave us that opportunity. They gave us the opportunity to discuss some indicators are overly complicated, some are not measuring what we're not supposed to measure. But as Steve was saying, on 16.4.1, illicit financial flows was one of the most fought indicators. 16.5.2 on corruption, 16.1.2 on conflict-related death. So it gave us this huge, huge opportunity to finally speak, because we all agreed they were important. That I think is a major achievement. We all agreed it was extremely important, and we had no idea what we were doing, how to actually do it. And now we've done it, and we've done the methodological part. We have still to do the other part. And I wanted to add, there's one point that I have not seen much on this discussion. There's 3 indicators that I think are key for this community, which are 17, 17.18.1, 17.18.2, and 17.83. The indicators on statistical capacity, on independence of national statistical offices, on the funding of national statistical systems. Because as we say, we have all of this to produce. At some point, when I did not have white hair, I was in the statistical office, and we were told, do administrative records. That's the best. It's easy, it's cheap. The administrative records is not cheap. It's expensive. To set the system to function properly, expensive. We need funding for that. They told us, okay, you do surveys, but 1,000 sample is more than enough. No, 1,000 is not enough. We need the funding to do it. We need to be able, if you wanted to do it accurately. So this is a long, just to say that there is a lot of shortcomings that I really think we should continue to document, so we don't do the same mistake in 2018 or 28, I'm sorry. But there are also a lot of breakthrough success stories, and I love the graph with the evolution of the tiering system. I really, really, really love that graph, because it shows that we're not there, but we're in the right direction.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. There are 2 colleagues at the hand of I don't see, yeah. Yeah, okay. And then I will come.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks a lot, Steve, for that very wonderful presentation. I think reflecting back to the many years from 2015 to now is there's a lot of, I think, evidence along those pathways that you can see that we've really walked huge milestones to reach where we are. So I do agree with that specific position. But I also think that there's a lot of untold stories around the successes of those indicators that you could potentially also complement, maybe through IAG, also tell that story much more better. I think one being the whole element about collaborations around thematic areas of indicators, the co-custodianships that we share across agencies, but even across countries. I think this is a wonderful story to tell there, including mapping even more better the amounts of resources that we've put in to make sure that these indicators move to where they are today in terms of understanding also the concepts, but also the issues that are affecting a lot of those thematic areas. So I feel there's a lot we can push in there. From UN Habitat, we also see that we've done so much advocacy on the multilateralism that involves the uptake on SDGs, and that is very much evidenced in cities today and local governments that have equally picked up, including contextualizing these SDG indicators to issues that they can best measure and they can best relate to. So in a way, I feel that Steve has told maybe the part 1 of the story, but we need also to help him and push it to the part 2 that can tell a success that statistics data has really helped push the theme of SDGs, but also the value of data to contributing towards understanding those SDGs better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't see.
Danish Institute for Human Rights, sayonara. Thank you indeed, Stevie, for starting the day with such an inspiring presentation that gets us to think also about the next steps. I'm often one to make the very unpopular point that we don't have enough indicators precisely for the point of what exactly we want to measure there. And I just want to make the hook because you ended your presentation with the call for thinking for the next steps. And I would say to there not only thinking about it in the next agenda, but also in what we can do with the years that we have left with this. I come from a human rights institution working very closely with civil society as well, who has been collecting data on so many issues that are related to the SDGs. And it is often very frustrating to sit in a room full of statisticians that have closed themselves in a very large extent to the obligation and also the weight and the burden of carrying the measurement of this agenda alone. And being also on this side of having so much to offer, both from a human rights institution perspective and the data that is produced there, and it's still so little tapped by this community, but also from the civil society organizations and the data that is produced there. So as we look forward, I would just ask us to try to reduce the frustrations on both sides by perhaps using each other a bit more, by trying to determine what are actually the priorities in this monitoring of this agenda. We talk a lot about the limitations of using data from civil society, for example, due to lack of comparability or issues of methodologies. And I don't know for how long we should continue having these conversations on this basis, or rather jumping that bridge and making the efforts to see can this actually help us be more adaptable, as Steve called for, in finding the solutions to support policymakers in making the decisions based on the data that is out there? Can we bridge the gap of knowledge perhaps that is there with methodologies or other challenges that we find on the way to improve and empower others also to contribute to this very, very heavy burden of monitoring the SDGs? So those are just some of the questions that I would like us to think about and just try to work on them as we move towards the next years and towards the next agenda, so that we try to spread the responsibility for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. India, please.
Thank you. That was a very good presentation, and I do agree that most of the targets, not the most, a lot of targets having so much complicated words or so much ambitious or futuristic word, like he say vulnerable or basic services, are all words like that. So the targets are having a lot of such type of terms, and the indicators are reflecting only few of terms. Suppose the target may have having 10 different kind of such ambitious terms, and indicator is reflecting only one or two. So on the basis of one or two indicator, whether we will be able to say that we have achieved the target or not. Somewhere I do agree that if we see the language of the target, then number of indicators are less in order to truly reflect the target. And somewhere the indicators are much more than the target is saying. If I recall simply indicator, the target 3.1, which is one of the very simplest target, having very simple language, by 2030 to end MMR less than 70. And there are two indicators. One is simply MMR. Other one is the proportion of birth attended by skilled health personnel. So one indicator would have been sufficient here. The second one, I know it is having positive impact on the first one. There may be many more indicators which may have impact on MMR. So one indicator would have been sufficient here. So on the basis of now, if one indicator, one country is doing better, on another it is not doing better, then how we will say we have achieved or not achieved the target? So there are some complications in the language of targets, which I do agree with you. It is just an observation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There was a colleague at the hand. Yeah, I will see. 1, 2.
Thank you very much. João Pedro, Chief Statistician from UNICEF. I just want to thank you, Steve, and I think the discussion, listening to the discussion regarding this issue of administrative data versus household survey data, I think which started yesterday and came back just now, I think it would be very useful for our community to think about this narrative, right? Because I think this is a false dichotomy. I don't think there is an issue and a tension between survey versus administrative records. There are many instances in which the only way we can collect good data is with sample surveys because of the nature of the indicator, right? Things like, learning or poverty, right? If we're going to try to do this, monitor this, or childhood development, right? If we're going to try to monitor that using administrative records, it would be impossibly expensive. And administrative records, even in the most sophisticated countries, is not also without biases, right? As I learned when I worked in Austria or, in the European Union, there are issues with administrative records as well. So we need to be very careful with this narrative because the way it gets translated in the policy world outside this room, it takes very bizarre shapes and forms, right? And end up undermining actually the strength that it comes from actually having an integrated approach of household surveys with administrative records. So one suggestion is how can we strengthen this narrative about the complementarity between administrative data and survey data and kind of move away from this false dichotomy between the two. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've seen, yes, on the right and then on the left. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and sorry to wave. So, I just wanted to quickly come in and very strong point just made, but to support the comment from Norway. Sorry, my name's Natalia from the expert group on refugee IDP and statelessness statistics. I wanted to come in and support Norway's suggestion to really get ahead of the next agenda. And perhaps use the momentum of meeting here this week to actually propose, what that could look like, when that could initiate, so it starts being monitored from 2030 rather than from 2035. I also wanted to support, and Steve, thank you so much for articulating many things I think a lot of us feel, but really nice to hear it said so articulately in your presentation. I particularly liked your point about communicating that the progress, impact, limitations of this whole space to the political community, for want of a better expression. That has different ways it plays out at the regional, national, and global levels, which I think was implicit in your presentation, but maybe more complicated to unpack how we actually do that in practice in a coordinated way. But the point I really wanted to raise, which was why I raised my to take the mic, was to say that coming back to your point about in some cases indicators don't necessarily measure the essence of, or miss the board completely in terms of the target, and I feel, and unsurprisingly so, that we really need to refocus on the broader commitment to leave no one behind, because even if the indicator framework isn't perfect, even if there are some places where we just have to live with it for a little bit longer because of the process that it's come through, there are still population groups that are completely missing from the data. So in many cases, this is not an issue just of disaggregation or better use of administrative records. It's really a political issue about including these populations in the first place in almost any of the data sources that are under consideration. So really the focus here, or my request to the group, is not necessarily not only to think about better measuring targets, but also refocusing our energy to the broader commitment of leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, the lady.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Steve, for a very inspirational presentation of the evolution of this SDGs and indicator framework. I think for UNEP or for the environment, I think it really puts statistics in the picture. I think before we had the 2030 agenda, there was much less attention for, the indicators and the statistics in the environment. I do think, just like Sweden mentioned, that when you had your concern in the beginning, speaking to the two policymakers or ambassadors, you know, as an afterthought, yeah, can you now put in place the indicator framework? I think the experience with Kunming, Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is that this process, the political process, the policy process of having the goals and targets was much more linked to how are we going to monitor this and how our countries go, how will this be part of the whole reporting and you know, transparency process. And I think we see a similar evolution also within the climate change. And another one is coming up, which will look at the chemicals and waste, which is interesting because it's multi-stakeholder and not only governmental evolution. I also think what 2030 agenda did is make these boundaries between the environmental, economic, and social much less pronounced. You know, you see it in indicators that come back in two different goals, like 8 and 12, where you have the material footprint and the domestic consumption, which is a good example that, you know, you can't dissect or separate out the environmental, the social, and the economic. And on your point that you made about the data, I think in environment we really also have another perspective, which is yes, you need different sources. There are many different possibilities, modeling, whether it's modeling using geospatial data, etc. There are many opportunities to gain more information. And if you look at, for example, an indicator like 661, which is about the extent of water systems, you know, of course, the reporting happens at the country level, the data are at the country level. But what's really interesting, if you look at it, is the ecosystem level. A lake that's not bound by country boundaries, for example. So I think, you know, with the 2030 agenda, I agree. It opened up a whole different perspective on how to monitor and measure and collect statistics about the world and you know, nature, the people that are in it, etc.
Thank you so much. Please help me. I know that there is a colleague at the hand. You? Yes, and then there should be Sven, sorry, Germany and Canada and and Denmark. And sorry, because at the beginning I told Sweden instead of Norway. So I'm very sorry for that.
Thank you. I didn't know if I wanted still to take the floor because I think we could have this discussion during hours and hours. But thanks very much, Steve. I think this indeed, I still want to echo what colleagues say. It's very inspiring for these very inspiring presentations. I think maybe we started the meeting with there was maybe some pessimism around on the use of the impact of what, and I think indeed there's been significant progress, still challenges, and we need to learn how to improve still what we do. Just short, the things I want to say, and many relevant things have been said, and I support them. I think I think we do a very exciting work, and I think the work that we do, all of us, impact human rights. It does. Whether we realize people's rights to information, whether we publish or not data revealing inequalities, revealing the groups left behind, this impact. We saw that this is having an impact. If we look at the table, if we look at the data availability, yeah, we're not there. But it's the way also it has been approached, and we've heard different presentations, trying to work together, work with national counterparts, change the structure, measure things that we never measured before. I mean, this is so important. This is beyond us. We're not doing that to fill tables. We're doing that to improve people's life. This is what I think is driving us, and we. I mean, a huge responsibility on us. I think with human rights obligations that states have, that we do have when we work in a national statistical office or in international organizations. So how we can work better together with national human institutions, with civil society organizations. So, and we've made significant progress, but there's more we can do, and incredible work done by NSOs in many countries on measuring very, very difficult topics. So I think this is important to be kept in mind. I'm thinking of the number of indicators. Yes, I think we all agree that if we can have less indicators, it's good, it's easier for all of us. But our member states are going to be less ambitious in the next agenda than they were for this agenda. So I would say, okay, I think they will want to be even more ambitious, but then we say, okay, but we just measure certain things, not others. I don't know how are we going to reconcile this, or are we going to have indices that will have multiple indicators under that? I don't know, but there's definitely methodological criteria that needs to be taken more and more on board, but lots of progress was made. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Germany, please.
Is it on now? Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Steve, for this presentation. I think it was brilliant and smart at the same time. It reminded me of some slides I already made for a presentation in Germany several years ago with the issues you showed here, because it's, I think for us, quite a lot was very obvious from the beginning on. For example, that lots of targets were not one target, but several targets wrapped in one text. So thank you for this really brilliant presentation. And I think it's a good start to use this presentation to look ahead. I mean, we now knew how the process worked in the past, but I think we have to look ahead what's coming next. First of all, I like to thank Norway, because I think Norway had a really important point. We have to start to plan what we are going to do for whatever comes after 2030. And are we prepared for what comes after 2030? I think yes and no. It depends on us whether we are prepared or not. So when I look at Steve's presentation, and I like going back to the archives, and you went back to 2015, I even went further back into the 90s, when a young girl called Angela Merkel was environmental minister in Germany. Most of us know her as chancellor later on. And at that time, we developed a system that's now called environmental economic accounting. And if you read the preface of the first report on it, it says we need such a system for sustainability reporting. Do we make use of it? Not really. So if I look at the set we have now, it's a huge collection of different things we call indicator. I think the first thing we have to reconsider what we call indicator. What is an indicator? What is data? What is additional data? Is everything we produce an indicator? Every disaggregation an indicator? Every dashboard an indicator? I think we have to work on the wording we do have. That's one thing. The second thing is, I read on the internet too late, I have to admit, that there was a book published quite recently by Yonggi on interlinkages of the SDG goals. But if the goals are interlinked, are our indicators interlinked? No, they are not. Every indicator we use uses different definitions, different sources, has a different focus. So we know the goals are interlinked, but we don't use interlinked indicators to measure the goals. So that's something we have to reconsider. How can we interlink the indicators we use if we know that the goals are interlinked? And recalling Stefan from yesterday, I think we have powerful tools. SNA could be a powerful tool. If you look at the accounting framework they do have, the SEA, the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, I have to advocate because I'm chair of the London Group on Environmental Accounting, is a powerful tool. So we have the tools we need. We have the tools to integrate data from different sources. I don't care if it's satellite data, if it's administrative data, if it's survey data, as long as it fits into the accounting framework and I can use to harmonize and put it into this framework. So I think we don't have a kind of competition between different sources. We need to see them as a complementary thing. And we have to keep in mind that we do not use all this data only for producing indicators. Probably it could be just for checking other data sources or whatever. So not every data source we use actually has to feed into an indicator. That's another thing we have to keep in mind. So I think if we want to get ready for what comes after 2030, we know, or we actually have an idea what politicians will set on the agenda. So we should be ready to have our tools ready, to have systems ready to integrate data from different sources into frameworks for the different topics that might come. So then we are ahead of policy, and then we can give them a tool at hand before they decided really how to measure it. Otherwise, they will decide exactly what they want to have measured, and we will not be able to. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Canada, please.
Thank you, Steve. I think you can see that we could go all day discussing this. So fascinating presentation, and I agree with most of your comments that particularly that the delegation of measurement was actually the delegation of the meaning of the agenda. And you provided a reflection from the lens of a UN entity, but from a country perspective, I know I came to the group super naive. I thought the IAEG would create the indicators. And so imagine my surprise when I got to New York in 2015 and was handed a package that had 600 indicators and they were colorful and there was all sorts of things in it. And they were developed by what I came to know as custodian agencies. So that was the first thing that I had no idea what I was getting into. And shockingly, I'm still here. But it was very overwhelming and intimidating. And as I recall, colleagues from developing countries were very concerned about the UN deciding what data would be used for measurements. And I remember in that first meeting, several developing countries saying, no way, not again. And so that to me was what the country-led, country-driven meant. And so there was very strong opinions on that. So what is my question? Because I'm kind of rambling. It is more a question of what is the path forward. We do need something that has lessons learned, but from more than the UN perspective or the custodian agency, from the country's perspective, from civil society perspective as well. While we may have defined the meaning of the agenda, we left ourselves on the hook for measuring it without securing the resources to do that adequately. And no policy area would ever develop an encompassing agenda without getting funding for it, right? And yet we did that. And so the problem to me is we still don't have the ear of policymakers. We are not invited to the room at the right time. We invite policymakers into our events, and you'll see even at the commission, they come in, they do their presentation, and then they get the hell out, right? They don't stay, they don't hear what the issues are. So so we say, oh no, we're in the room with policymakers. No, we're not really, right? They do us a favor by dropping in, and then they do not want to stay. And the same when they invite us, it's kind of, yeah, you're here. So we should absolutely create something concrete, a report on lessons learned for the agenda that is to follow, and for those who will follow, who will be tasked to it. But the bigger question is, how do we get in the room at the right time? And I don't think we've cracked that. You know, Stefan mentioned yesterday that he's kind of in the room, but it seemed for the beyond GDP, but it didn't really seem that is he being listened to in the room, and is he advocating from the UN perspective and the custodian agency perspective, or is he advocating from the country perspective? Because I think both are important. So that's my question to you. How do we get in the room at the right time with the right people? Thank you.
Thank you so much to everybody. Only word as Italy, if it is possible. I mean, it was a statistical revolution, and it really was. And it was because, and it will be, in my opinion, it is a starting point, because it helped all of us to build common languages. This is the key, in my opinion. And common language means communication among methods, metadata, and people, also politicians in some cases, because it happened. At least in Italy, it happened. So I think it's very important. And in some cases, disaggregations means, again, common language, not to leave nobody behind. Thank you very much. And Steve, please, you have a very, yes.
So thank you. I'm sure the poor chair was thinking this would be over at 9:30. So I'll try and be really quick. So Belarus will talk bilaterally then, that these are really health issues you want to discuss. I don't think anybody else wants to hear them. Liv, first of all, congratulations on moving to Statistics Sweden. But I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think it's a great opportunity to look at lessons learned. Marianne, I just agree, so I'm going to skip. Robert.
Sorry. No, sorry.
Swedish point.
It was my fault. Sorry. Sorry for that.
Robert was talking about there's other success stories too, not least the collaboration between agencies, between countries. And I think all of those successes, it would be good to articulate. So it was a comment. I don't have anything particularly to say. I agree. Same with India. JP, UNICEF. I don't think I was, at least I hope I didn't present a dichotomy. My point is that, so I agree there should be complementarity between primary and secondary data. My point though is, I think that complementarity hasn't been symmetric. And that's really the point. I think we need to put more effort into developing administrative data in countries. And that was the point that the SIDS themselves were making yesterday. And I couldn't agree more with them. But I think we need to develop systems, and that's my fundamental point, is developing systems that are flexible and adaptable to address. And that means using all of the data at our disposal. Natalie was, okay, she was supporting Norway, Sweden, but made the point as well about the focus on leaving no one behind, which I think really is the crucial point. There are still many communities that haven't seen the benefit of any of our work. Lord, I think, yeah, the points around the interconnections and interconnectivities are really important, and that's something, again, we need to bring out. Nicholas, I'm just going to agree, I'm going to skip. Germany, well, that was fascinating. I didn't know Angela Merkel is that the origins of environmental accounting. So there's a story to be told. And I agree, the word indicator has many purposes, and we probably could tighten up the language. The one thing though, I'm not sure I would agree with your last point. I think some of the indicators are kind of interlinked, because in a lot of cases we went to a lot of effort to make sure that the concepts we use in one are consistent with the concepts in another. So It may not have been universally successful, but I think there was huge attempts to do that. And in fact, like Raphael is here last week at the ICLS, they've just pushed through groundbreaking work on informal labor, informal economy. And again, the SNA are doing their best now to make sure that that's reflected. So there is a lot of effort being made to try and do that. Cara, I think you've hit the nail on the head. This is the big question. I don't know what the answer is, but I agree. I think we're in the room in a superficial way. I think we're in the room when it's convenient, but I think we're not in the room when it's inconvenient. And that's really the challenge. We've made some progress on the custodian side within just the UN itself, but there's an awful lot more to be done. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I do think trying to articulate some of these issues is part of the solution. It's only going to be part of the solution. And with that, I'll stop. Apologies to the chair for having destroyed your agenda.
Thank you, the whole agenda. Thank you so much. Yes. And now, please, I would like to ask to Rafael, yes, de Medina, to do his presentation, the conclusion of the 21st International Conference of Labor Statisticians and Measuring Social Justice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. No, I will be brief because I will link, take what some of the things that we have just heard about with Steve's excellent presentation, and some of the things I will focus more on the beyond, or the looking ahead, because one thing, it's clear, the political system doesn't stop. And they have not stopped because of the SDGs. And I want to give you an example from my domain. The political thrive has started to think in another framework. Why? Because they thought that probably the existing frameworks, and it's not only on SDGs, but other things related to the world of work, is not enough to explain the big impact that the different external factors are having in the world of work. And particularly all the political turmoil, the uprisings in the countries, the votes, the electoral swings to populism, the unrest. So all these things created, I would say, a critical mass that challenges existing measures on labor, and including the SDGs, because in the SDGs, we have around 30 indicators that we can identify related to the world of work. But apparently the politicians, and when I say the politicians, are your ministers of labor in their countries, in the whole world, plus the employers organizations, plus trade unions, plus civil society in many aspects. They challenge existing metrics, and they are not satisfied, even with the 230-something indicators that we have. So how our existing structure can help on that, and this is what I want to highlight, or give you an example, how this strength that we have just seen can help us to really face these challenges from the political side. Just a couple of years ago, there is within the International Labour Organization, which is, but not as an office, but the organization. So it means the member states, namely of the ministries of labor plus employers and workers, they discuss the need to focus their attention on what they call social justice. And of course, the first thing is to call for measures and to call for metrics, ignoring, and then I come to the point of our probably need to disseminate more what we have done. And I think one lesson is that we are preaching among converted, but in the external world, many people are not aware that these indicators are there or are being used or even can be helpful for the advocacy. And so I think we have a lesson learned. We have to be more proactively communicating this. And I think the role of the statistical system is something that I want to make clear, I would say, to highlight in this particular area, that is in the labor area. Why? Because, of course, then the political system tried to define what is social justice, but they didn't need to define because it's a concept that is a philosophical concept or whatever. But then imagine the political side trying to be very vocal in the need to put social justice with a labor lens in a concrete metrics in order to measure progress. And they say that we are fed up of this uprising, of this unrest in the world. We need, there is a big dislocation, I would say, in the world of work. The social contract is even at stake. So now we need to redefine, we need to have new measures. So please provide measures. And this is where statistics started to step in the process. But I wanted to give you a more idea what they were having as a politicians. They have this idea that there are 4 dimensions of social justice, these universal rights, and this will resonate with the SDG agenda. So I will give you afterwards how we face this challenge. So universal rights and capabilities, equal access to opportunities, distribution, of course, as one of the key issues, not only property, but income distribution, but also wealth, etc., opportunities. What they called just transitions, it means the impact in the world of work of globalization, technology, demographic, environmental, and crisis. Crisis, I mean wars, unrests, these kind of uprisings in the world. So all of these are the strong, I would say, push, even ignoring the existing indicators on SDGs when they were discussing the different areas that they wanted to advance. So there were many calls. Actually, the new Director General of the ILO was elected by them with a strong mandate to do these things. And of course, it's not that it's a custodian agency, it was the constituents from the custodian agencies who pushed that. So it came from the roots. But we had an existing agenda that was even accepted and endorsed by the SDGs and even before, with this our decent work, which is what we had in Goal 8, that it was okay, it's employment, productive employment with the universalization of social protection, with respect to labor rights, and based on tripartism, negotiations between employers, workers, and trade unions and employers. So for that, of course, they came strongly to ask for metrics. And then it's where we stepped in as Department of Statistics, but also with the rest of the different structures that we have in the different regions in terms of how we face these challenges from the political side. So we had a small, I would say, revival of our 2015 push in the UN Statistical Commission, but in a sectorial part. And it was a bit disappointed at the very beginning of the lack of knowledge that our counterparts in this area has shown on the framework that we have worked a lot during all these years. So for that, of course, we were dating back to the early 90s, where we had to also talk, or I would say establish the same language with them. And of course, we reminded them that there were already tripartite agreements in ICLS in the past, in 2008, where there was a framework on decent work indicators, that there were more than 70 indicators referring to the different areas of decent work, and reminding them that this was what paved the way towards presenting a coherent set of indicators for the 2015 agenda, so for the 2030 agenda. So we had to remind, and so again, my idea that the political system doesn't learn, and we are taking for granted that we are going to go beyond, but we will have to reinvent again. And I think this is a lesson learned from the political side. So what we did, of course, is we started to again make them aware of the 2030 agenda. This was proven to be very strong. Fortunately, there was an argument that for them sometimes they were really not even aware of many of the possibilities that the agenda has, because they were narrowing only on 3 or 4 indicators, but they have lost the idea that this is an agenda that has clearly links between the goals and the indicators. So for that, we needed to find a parsimonious set of indicators around. We are in this process, so it's an early start, and that's the good thing, because I could involve in the ICLS in this, because I wanted to take the statistical community to this dialogue, and because of that, we presented certain proposals during the ICLS. It's an ongoing thing that it has to be, because there will be another summit. We have heard 2 summits but there is a third one. 2025 supposedly will be the social summit, the World Social Summit, which is another summit that will be dealing apparently with big issues on social, like it was in the 1995, I think, the last one. So because of that, these constituencies of ministries, trade unions, and employers organizations, they decided that they want to present some state of the social justice with the labor lens. This is, of course, a very repeating ourselves, the different. So what was our argument? Well, the conclusions that we had in the ICLS last week, well, several, because we had in different sessions, different points. It's not that we have a concrete conclusion, because we start this process. But first, the good thing is that the statistical system has stepped in now. So we have dragged this again. We are defining the agenda. To be frank, the same that happened at the SDG level that we define, and I strongly agree with Stephen on that. With the metrics we are defining, it's because it was so vague and everything is impossible to understand at the level of targets, that with the indicators are grounded in some cases. In other cases, we also have the same vagueness in the indicators, but we are struggling with that. But in this kind of things, we follow the same pattern and try to ground this, and of course make our national frameworks and international frameworks aware of that. The SDG indicators were the cornerstone, of course. It was very important. But of course, for the areas, I have not gone in the details of the area because I don't want to overburden you, but for the areas, it's not enough, because they want to go in depth for the different aspects of labor deficits. So it means that we have to turn to other existing indicators. The decent work indicator framework that has been accepted in 2008 by ICLS, the quality of employment from UNECE. We have national initiatives like social cohesion from Statistics Canada, well-being from OECD, quality of life, and many others. All these frameworks we have been presenting them, that they have the strong labor components and they address a lot of things. The gaps that we have came to the conclusion that the SDG agenda, the indicator framework, and even more, they have some gaps. Like, for instance, the inequality is one of them, in the sense that inequalities are embedded in our indicators through the disaggregation and some indicators, but they are still very important indicators that are not there. So they have identified this as a need. The other thing is the gaps that we will have, like the just transitions that I mentioned, that are not poverty. Well, these are the very concrete things that they have identified in terms of indicators available for them. But the other conclusion is that we need to also combine with qualitative data and citizen-generated data, because, well, it's just social justice is something inherent for the people, so it has to be not only quantified by external but also taking this is something that it was discussed there. They also thought that it's not possible to have any composite index. And then the main purpose of this framework or emerging frameworks that they have defined themselves is that they want to measure progress within countries and not have anything of the sort of HDI or whatever in the sense of comparing between countries. They want to have benchmarks at the national level and progress but not comparison between countries. And of course, this is linked with the beyond GDP. And I want to make a special thing about the beyond GDP. Of course, quoting a bit the policy brief that Stefan made reference yesterday. But just as, again, the beyond GDP has not started with the UN. It was even before. The Stiglitz sent Futuzzi that it was the report that it was in 2009, that it was at the request of Sarkozy from France. This was, I remember because the ILO was there, but it was the early attempt and the seed, I think, is what it kicked off the discussions of the beyond GDP. But of course, then the limitations of the existing GDP and for labor. And this is where another thing that Stephen made reference is and we talked about this in this framework of social justice for labor, is the need that GDP has to be seen not only as the headline indicator, but combined with important things like the topic that we had a resolution passed in the last ICLS last week on informality, which is embedded now in the SNA 2025, because it's the first time that labor statisticians and national accountants are working together, and they work together, and informality is part, informal economy will be part of the mesh embedded in the SNA. And what is also important is all the things related to unpaid work. That is another thing that has been highlighted as core to contribute to the SNA. So these are the things that we have discussed during last week and the 12 days before, so I am a bit exhausted of talking, so I will be very brief only with this, and only telling you that as a lesson learned is that the SDG indicators, they were very convincing in the sense that unfortunately for their lack of deep knowledge of them, I think we have a long way to do for communication and to have our politicians and policymakers aware that they are. I don't know, I think we have been talking about a lot between ourselves, but I think we have to go out, because I noticed surprisingly, even in audience that we were supposed to have a clear knowledge about this, that sometimes, of course, they change. There is a lot of turnover in our governments, in all the governments, developing and developed countries, and then people start to reinvent the wheel again. And this is an example with the social justice and how we could drag the discussion towards the SDG. We had a wonderful panel with Statistics Canada, with Anil leading, but also with Francesca. I took Francesca Perucci, I think, and I think this resonated, but some of them, they thought, oh, it's a surprise. And I was shocked to see people from ministries of labor, supposedly from the statistical side, that they were not so aware of the wealth that we have in this framework. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the excellent presentation. And we have a lot of things done and a lot to do. I'm very sorry, but I think that I have to ask him questions during the break, because we are very late at the moment. And so I will ask, so we will have now the break of 50 minutes, because we have to dedicate 5 minutes to take a photo before coming in again. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody.
Hello? It's on? Okay, can everyone just go outside and then we quickly take a group photo before the coffee break?
We are on agenda item number 7, and it is about the comprehensive review. So I'm going to walk you through specific criteria to review, to guide the review and process on preparation of the draft framework. Slide. So just recall that the guiding principles of the 2025 comprehensive review will be the same as in 2020, and that is that a comprehensive review provides a good opportunity to improve the indicator framework, help global monitoring of the 2030 agenda, and to provide the necessary guidance to countries, many of whom are already well advanced in implementing their national framework and reporting platforms. So the guiding principles for the review include the review needs to take into account investments that have already been made at the national and international levels and should not undermine ongoing efforts. The revised framework should not significantly impose an additional burden on the National Statistical Office or system. There should be space for improvement in the framework while at the same time ensuring that the changes to the framework are limited in scope and that the size of the framework remains the same. The focus of the common work of the expert group should remain on national implementation of the framework in countries for the achievement of the SDGs. Specific criteria for the implementation of the 2025 comprehensive review include the aim of the review is to maintain the same number of indicators currently in the framework and not to alter significantly the original framework, which is already being implemented in most countries and should not increase the reporting burden on the NSS. The proposed indicator that if anybody wants to submit an indicator or a modification, it must have an agreed upon methodology. So no tier 3 indicator proposals will be considered. And data must be available for a proposed indicator for at least 40% of the countries and of the population across the different regions where the indicator is relevant and be suitable for global monitoring. Taking into account these first 2 criteria, an additional indicator may be considered only in exceptional cases where a crucial aspect of the target is not being monitored by the current indicator, or to address a critical or emerging new issue that is not monitored by the existing indicators. A deletion may be considered when a tier 2 indicator has not been able to submit any data to the global SDG monitoring, or it is proven to be too challenging for countries to implement, and a replacement will be proposed if the deleted indicator is the only indicator for monitoring the corresponding target. Adjustments or replacements will be considered when the indicator does not map well to the target or does not track the target well. Some additional criteria for the 2025 comprehensive review includes the addition of a sub-indicator within an existing indicator is discouraged as it adds to the reporting burden. Additionally, any proposal for a replacement or an additional indicator should minimize the use of sub-indicators to ensure the indicator framework does not expand. So no being sneaky. The IAEG-SDGs will examine closely all proposals to ensure the reporting burden does not increase as a result of additional sub-indicators. So in other words, we're watching. The timeline for the comprehensive review. November 2022, we shared the recommended timeline at the last IAEG meeting in Bangkok. So November 2023, the group will share specific criteria for the 2025 comprehensive review. Between January and June of 2024, the group will prepare a review of the framework, noting the possible deletions, replacement, adjustments, and additions based on previous analysis and assessments with assistance from the Secretariat, and of course, in conjunction with the next step, which is between the 1st and the 30th of April 2024. This is when the open call for proposals will be held, and all proposals for indicator changes for the 2025 review, that includes replacements, deletions, refinements, adjustments, and additional indicators, must be submitted to the Secretariat by the 30th of April. July and August 2024, open consultation will be held on the preliminary list of proposal for the indicator changes. September, the group will review the results of the consultations. and October and November 2024 at the next or the 15th IAEG-SDG meeting, the group will review the draft proposal of indicator changes to be included in the 2025 comprehensive review. And then December 2024 will prepare the final proposal and to be submitted for the commission at the 56th session in March 2025. Detailed submission requirements in the 2025 review. And so please, if you're planning on submitting something, please pay attention to this, because if you don't submit the right things, it won't be considered. So each submission must include all of the information listed below. An indicator proposal summary, no more than 2 pages using the template that will be provided. It'll have a background and the rationale for the indicator proposal, information on how and when the methodology became an international standard, and who is the governing body that approved it. Data sources and data availability, and detailed metadata following the metadata template. Available data and/or the link to the data can be located, and the data must be available for at least 40% of countries and of the population across the different regions for where the indicator is relevant, and a plan for how data coverage will be expanded if the current coverage is below 50%, and any other methodological documents or links to the documents so that the IAG can review. So key takeaways from the 2020 comprehensive review. Do remember that the Global Indicator Framework is designed to provide an overview of progress on SDGs. Proposals for global monitoring requires an international agreed methodology, a good coverage of data, and a custodian agency. Strictly follow the specific criteria and submission requirements. So pay attention to the details. Incomplete submissions or those that do not meet the criteria will be disregarded in the first round of elimination. Sounds like a sporting event. Do consult with the relevant custodian agencies where possible. A proposal is unlikely to be considered if it faces strong opposition from a custodian agency. So that's more for civil society and countries. If countries themselves are going to propose something, make sure you liaise with custodian agencies. Do have a look at the Global Indicator Framework. Do look at the Global Indicator Framework as a whole. Indicators are complementary and interdependent. Consider how your proposal will impact the framework. Will they repeat something that already exists? Do they significantly expand the size of the framework? And would it be easy or practical to implement? So this is key, the red. Do not think that because your proposal may be excluded, that it does not mean the issue is not important. The IAEG-SDG is going to make limited changes to the Global Indicator Framework and ensure balance across the goals. Indicator proposals not considered or eliminated may still have a key role to play in various national, regional, or thematic monitoring. So just because it's not an SDG global indicator doesn't mean it's not important. It just means we have to limit changes to the framework. Do remember that an important indicator that is not included can be included in thematic frameworks outside of the SDGs or used for more in-depth review on a particular topic. So the IAG's preparation of the draft indicator framework between January and June on our timeline. The IAG will review existing Tier 2 indicators with low or no data coverage. Indicators with no data or indicators with less than 30% data coverage will be closely reviewed. Consider that, is there a strong explanation why the data availability of the indicator is low or has had little improvement over the years? Is the indicator in consideration the only indicator for a target? Or is there a replacement indicator that would meet specific criteria for the 2025 review? Also, the IAG will be looking at goals with low data coverage. And as an example of that here, Yongi, I believe, presented this yesterday. If you look at the chart and note the goals, I'll draw your attention to goals 13, 16, and 5. If we consider two of the most urgent issues facing the planet right now, that's climate change, peace and security. look at the goals, the coverage. These are the goals with the lowest reporting on global indicators. Additionally, Goal 5, gender equality, has reporting of SD indicators at below 50%. And so not surprisingly, these 3 goals will fall under the review of the IAEG-SDG as we undertake the comprehensive review. So that is it. Thank you. So I think we should probably take questions on this right now. We're going to try to catch up on time, but I want to make sure that we respond to questions on this because I think this is important that everybody understand where we're going. So we'll take questions on this and then we'll invite FAO up for the next presentation. I see Sven.
Thank you, Kara. I would like just to ask you for a quick clarification. So you mentioned you will only accept indicators with at least 40% coverage. So that means that a country actually can't present an indicator because countries normally do not have information on global coverage of data. And you said countries should get in touch with a possible custodian agency before proposing this. Does this in the end mean countries now need approval by a custodian agency before they can submit a suggestion for replacement or an additional indicator?
So I think you have to consult with a custodian agency because they're going to be the ones responsible for the global reporting of it. So if you have something that you wish to submit, contact the custodian agency, have a discussion with them on what is the data availability. Do they think this is a good idea? If it's for global reporting, keep in mind that national indicator frameworks exist. And if it's, it could be if it's a great idea for Germany, it goes in their national reporting. If it's not a good idea for an addition to the global indicator framework. But certainly we know that last year or 2020, there were submissions by countries and they didn't speak to custodian agencies, so they were caught off guard, and so they didn't have enough. We didn't have enough information. Also, countries that submitted proposals didn't provide enough metadata, if I recall correctly. So that's why you should work with a custodian agency just to make sure that it's possible to report globally. There's a lady over here.
He's first.
I can't see who here. Oh, Barry. Yes, please.
Can stakeholders submit proposals?
Yes, stakeholders can. Same requirements.
Yes, thank you. The 40% criteria in terms of data availability, can you specify the time reference? Because some of our indicators are dependent on household surveys, which are not conducted regularly or annually by some countries. So what will be the time reference for that 40% data availability? Thank you.
So we actually have a very loose criteria. So you need to have at least one data point since 2015.
Just one question on the indicators that enter the framework after, so for instance, in the 2020 review. So they had the last time to actually start measuring, and we also had the unfortunate COVID time that did not allow us to progress much. So will they still have to fill the 40% criteria? The new indicators, they came after.
It's only for new proposals. However, we will be reviewing all indicators for which there is no data, and we need or low coverage to find out what the plans are for. So new proposals must be 40%.
Yeah, quick clarification question as well on the indicators that will be reviewed and that are, let's say, under threat of dropping the framework. Will there be like transparency on the list of these indicators so that we can also try to work on that discussion in advance?
Well, I think there will be discussion with custodian agencies on, okay, what is the plan? How's it going? I foresee the IAG requesting discussions with or information from custodian agencies.
Maybe just add, during the open consultation, if we propose the IAG as a list of a proposal, including deletion or adjustment, anyone can send comments and suggestions.
Claire Thomas, Minority Rights Group. Can I just check the process is identical for within current indicator text, minor changes, and the introduction of a new indicator or sub-indicator?
So we do annual refinements, which you saw so those are ongoing. Revisions fall under the 2025 comprehensive review. So if it's a revision, that means it's more of a major change, so it would fall under.
Another tough question. Back in the day, if you remember, rule of law index was proposed and rejected from the global indicator list. A similar process was conducted by Eurostat on EU SDGs. And I also supported the suggestion of the Transparency International's composite indicator for that, corruption perceptions index. And at least finally they agreed to include this in the EU SDGs list, because this could be of course we know we are not supporting composite indicators, but this could be the only indicator that could be relevant with the target. And for the rule of law targets under goal 16 that we discussed yesterday, I think something like rule of law index could be the only indicator that we can propose and correspond with the target, in my humble opinion. So at any point, should we reconsider including that type of an index which can compare all countries as well with an established methodology? Thank you.
That would be a proposal. So you'd have to find the appropriate custodian agency, and then all the criteria, it would have to follow all of the criteria. So I can't speak to specific questions about proposals right now. Okay, I see no other questions or comments. And of course, if you have other questions, you can email the Secretariat, and the IAG would be, as we go through this process, don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions as things come up, because we'd be happy to respond. Okay, so we're moving to the next item, which is proxy indicators, or the FAO proposal for a proxy of SDG indicator 2.4.1 on productive and sustainable agriculture. Valerie Bizier from FAO will present that for us.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Let me present you today the latest proposal on the proxy indicator for SDG indicator 241. I'm presenting is on behalf of FAO for endorsement today. Next slide. So for those that are new in the IAG and those who couldn't attend the closed meeting on October 14, I'll give you an historical background on the discussion that already took place on this proxy indicator, then present the final proposal and some additional consideration for the endorsement. So in terms of the little history of this indicator, so the first proposal for a proxy on SDG indicator came into the August meeting of the IAEG in 2022. So we've been discussing that for more than a year now. The proposal contained 8 established metrics on sustainability and productivity in agriculture based on widely available national statistics that were produced from FAO annual reporting from country. So the reason why is the proxy indicator, no, the official indicator on 241 is a sensitive and political indicator like Steve mentioned earlier. It's one of those indicators that we negotiated through several rounds of negotiation with country in order to come up with a framework to measure sustainable and productive agriculture. So it takes also time for country to adjust the collection of 11 sub-indicators that are included in the official indicator and for FAO to provide assistance country. So at the moment, I would say that also in terms of the endorsement of the official indicator, we negotiated that up to 2019. It was endorsed in 2018, and then in November 2019, we proposed an additional refinement on the agrobiodiversity sub-indicator. So basically, we started working on capacity development late 2019 and 2020. So bear with us in terms of progress. So what we have right now is reporting from 42 countries on partial data to the 11 sub-indicator, and 2 countries reporting to the full set of sub-indicator. So the low country reporting is the result of several factors. First of all, we need to collect this information through agricultural surveys, which are not necessarily produced on a regular basis in some country or at all produced in some country. So it takes also time for the ones that have established agricultural survey to adjust their survey to collect this information. But I can assure you that FAO, we already established a comprehensive capacity development program to support this indicator. Is one of the indicator for which we have done the most outreach, and we're working closely with the 50 by 2030 initiative, which aim to support 50 countries by 2030 to collect annual agricultural survey in which this indicator will be mainstream. So next slide, please. No, we have. Yes, this one. So in August 2022, we presented the proposal to the IAEG, and then they requested more time to assess it. In November 2022, they agree that proxy indicator could be considered if the current indicator is challenging and the proxy has a sound methodology and good data coverage in a temporary measure to report on an SDG indicator. In December 2022, the group endorsed the initial FAO proposal of the proxy indicator, but in March 2023, at the UN Statistics Commission, a few countries objected on certain proposed constituent proxy metric included in the proxy indicator. So to resolve this impasses, the IAEG convened a small informal group of countries to review the proposed sub-indicator under the proxy measure and come out with a new proposal. I don't have the list here. This is an old version of the slide, but I would like to thank all the countries that participated in this negotiation, and also Cara for leading us through this process. We met on 4 occasions in May, June, and October, and we finally consensus on October 3rd, and we presented to the IAEG on a close meeting the progress and the initial proposal of the final proposal of the indicator. So the resulting proposal is a 7 proxy matrix that follows the 11 theme of the original SDG indicator, as you see here. For proxy for land productivity, we're using gross production value per hectare, agricultural land. For resilient, we have agreed on gross output diversification that looks at the diversity of agricultural product that is produced in a country. For soil health and fertilizer pollution risk, we agreed on nitrogen use efficiency, which is a ratio between crop removal of fertilizer and the total amount of fertilizer applied. For the water use team, we agreed on agricultural component of water stress, which is a disaggregation of indicator, SDG indicator 642. As we have, we couldn't agree on pesticide, an indicator on pesticide risk and biodiversity, and I'll come back to that. We have proposed a new indicator for the environmental dimension, which is greenhouse gas emission intensity in agriculture. This was not originally proposed in the official list of indicator because it cannot be really measured at the farm level. And the official indicator measure sustainability at the farm level. But if we look at national level, then this indicator makes sense. On the social dimension, in proxy to food security, we have agricultural value added per worker. And for decent work, we're using ILO informal employment in agriculture, which is a disaggregation of SDG indicator 831. Next slide, please. So all those sub-indicators are tier 1 indicator and are part of regular official reporting to FAO of national data, except for the ILO disaggregation, but I think Rafael can confirm here that it's also an official indicator reported by country. So contrary to the official indicator, it's the sub-indicator are national estimate instead of farm level estimate. And we propose to synthesize the 7 matrix into a single indicator to report on overall sustainability of agriculture under 241. And that for the assessment, we're using the same trend and current status assessment used in the global SDG progress chart so that we can classify the level of sustainability for each of the dimension and average out for the various dimension. And then for the aggregation at regional and global level, we propose to have a weighted aggregation to take into account the agricultural land of each country, so that in region where some country have a bigger weight in terms of agriculture, their sustainability is taking more into account in aggregates. The final score of each country, region, and the world is divided in 5 bands of sustainability. Next slide. So in terms of the controversial aspect that we had a lot of discussion, constructive discussion during the 4 meeting we had with the task force is agriculture, organic agricultural area, which we originally proposed for biodiversity proxy. It was in the end rejected for several reasons. One of which is that it's not a universal measure. Not all countries define organic agriculture the same. And in some countries, in order to be classified as organic, you need a certification. And some farms who, in fact, met all the criteria don't get the certification. So it's not a guarantee that agrobiodiversity measures are not applied in the country. The other controversial indicator was the pesticide use per hectare, which we also propose pesticide use per value of agricultural production, so that it measured the potential health and environmental impact of the use of pesticide. This was rejected also by country after numerous discussion, because the numerator, the pesticide use, just add up the active ingredient of pesticide. It doesn't make a nuance measure of the toxicity of the pesticide. So for highly toxic pesticide that only require a small amount of application, it doesn't make any sense to add it up with another type of pesticide that require more application in terms of active ingredient. So in conclusion, this is the final proposal that we came up with for endorsement. We submitted to the IAEG members a full document explaining the methodology of each of the sub-indicator. As I said, all the proposed sub-indicator are tier 1 indicator, so that they wouldn't require a validation process, in our opinion. And if you agree, we could publish as early as February time series on the proxy indicator. Here, I would just like to mention, because we are under the comprehensive review agenda item, this proposal of proxy indicator is not a proposal of a replacement of the official indicator at this stage. It's just a gap-filling measure to, in the meantime, that we can ensure that we have 50% of the country reporting on the official indicator. The reason for this is we think that the environmental indicator at farm level on pesticide, biodiversity are still needed. And this official indicator 241 was also included in several other framework, including the Koenig-Montreal monitoring framework as an headline indicator. So this is why we really want to propose this indicator as an interim measure until we fill the gap of the official indicator. Thank you.
So I'm going to open the floor to questions or comments from colleagues for FAO. I would like to just note before we go to those questions that this was a very consultative process, and I want to congratulate FAO and the countries that took part in this group, because it was sometimes contentious, but everybody, I think we've come to a really good agreement. So I'm prefacing that and biasing you all. So please raise your flags and we'll take questions. Barry?
I think you knew I was going to comment. I'd like to thank the FAO and the countries involved in the working group of coming up with a very, very good compromise. And by using existing data, it does mean we do have a measure of agricultural sustainability. And we look forward to collaborating with the FAO on dealing with some of the issues that remain. Thank you.
Brazil?
Yeah, thank you, Valerie, for your very good presentation. We understand that these are the data that can be collected, that the use of proxies is a temporary solution, but Brazil still has some questions. We took part in the informal group, but I received late feedback from our partner institutions. And I need to bring this here. The sub-indicator greenhouse gas emissions intensity deserves to be highlighted. which is not related to any indicator in the original work, and we consider it inappropriate to have it as a proxy. It should be remembered that commitments regarding the emission of greenhouse gases are national and not sectoral, which led to there being no mention in the original work regarding this aspect. Considering only agriculture emissions and ignoring carbon sequestration is not the most appropriate way to measure the sustainability of the activity. It would be better to have a carbon balance in production or to have an area dedicated to environmental preservation within private properties, for example. We suggest to delete this sub-indicator. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. India?
Thank you for this nice presentation. I have two observations. We are already in 2023, and yesterday it was shown that there are so many indicators on which we have very less data. And Daniel shows that, if I remember correctly, there are 5 indicators on which we have no data at all. Very few data, as 241 is one of them. So at this stage, we are why we are not going for replacement in 2025 comprehensive review, I do not know. As you are telling that it is only stop gauge arrangement. So whether we will be having data on the original indicator after few years, because we are already in 2023. Second, I have one reservation on the subcomponent of the indicators. We also got a late feedback from our stakeholders. So the indicators should be truly reflect all the aspects of the targets, and sufficient emphasis should be given on the adaptive capacity on climate change, disaster, and extreme weather while devising the subcomponent of indicator. We have a little reservation with the two subcomponent. First one is the informal employment in agriculture, which reflect only a small part of the vulnerability, not the adaptive capacity of the agriculture sector. The second one is the environmental part. We are taking the greenhouse gas emission intensity from agriculture, which was not originally part of the original 2.4.1 indicator. So, but we don't find any reason to include greenhouse gas emission from agriculture, because the potential cause of unsustainability of agriculture is the greenhouse gas emission from energy sector, power sector, or industry, not only from agriculture sector. So can we have think over on these component, or we may think over having some replacement of this indicator during the comprehensive review? Thank you.
Thank you. Japan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding the consideration of proxy indicators for SDG indicator 2.4.1, Japan would like to express its deep appreciation to the FAO and to Canada, the chair of the informal meeting. Japan has participated in discussion at the informal meetings to consider proxy indicators and agrees with the proposed proxy indicators submitted by the FAO. They are in line with the result of the informal meeting. On the other hand, the details of the preparation and evaluation methods for proxy indicators presented at this meeting need to be reviewed carefully in every country, as the indicators cover a wide range of areas. In this regard, we would like to request the establishment of an appropriate process that enables sufficient technical checks and detailed adjustment. And I would also take this opportunity to suggest one point regarding the NUE assessment methods. In my understanding, at the informal meeting, FAO proposed to set the NUE threshold at 50 to 90%, which was agreed upon by the participating countries, taking into account the fact that NUE is greatly affected by the differences in geographical condition in each country. Therefore, the optimal value of score 5 should be set at 50 to 90% based on the informal meeting consensus. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. IOCN.
Many thanks indeed to FAO and to all the countries concerned for all of the hard work on and good progress on this extremely important indicator. That said, we're a little bit concerned to see the gap still there in the proposed proxy as relates to biodiversity specifically. One possible way that might be worth exploring to resolve this could be to use a disaggregation of existing Tier 1 SDG indicator 15.5.1, the Red List Index, for species for which changes in extinction risk are due to changes in agricultural practices, either in a positive or in a negative direction. This would be available for nearly all countries at national levels, consistent with the approach of the proxy indicator. It could be incorporated by February 2024, and it would be directly responsive to the biodiversity elements of the target. IUCN would be happy to discuss this further if that might be useful. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tom. Any other questions? Okay, we'll let Valerie respond to what we have so far. Thanks.
Thank you for the support of many of you on this final proposal in general. Regarding the comments from Brazil on the proposal to remove greenhouse gas emission intensity in agriculture from the proposal, here it was not in the initial list. Greenhouse gas emission, like I mentioned, was not in the official indicator because the official indicator is meant to be measured at the farm level, and it doesn't make sense to ask farmers to report on their emissions. But we saw an opportunity if we use national indicator to report on that. In terms of the target, we didn't set a target value for the assessment of this sub-indicator. What we use is a quantile distribution to see who are the best performers, the worst performers, in order to assign a score for this particular sub-indicator. Here, I think, it's better than setting a specific target, like you said, that was not necessarily appropriate for the agricultural sector. In terms of the proposal for carbon balance, I don't know if you have any data in terms of data availability. Our main focus here in assessing the proxy sub-indicator is data availability, internationally recognized indicators, and official reporting. So if we are to accept or even look at this proposal, then this is something that we will need to look at. In terms of the question from India on informal employee, I'm not sure I completely understood your comments here. For distant work, we lack a bit the sufficient data for the agriculture sector. So the informal employment in agriculture was the best proxy indicator we found at this stage for this. The initial proposal for this dimension was poverty level in rural area, which was found by the group to be not capturing really the social dimension of the agricultural sector, because it's not because we have a high rate of poverty in certain area that is the lack of efficiency or productivity of the agriculture is responsible solely for for that. So this is why we prefer informal employment as to report on this employment. Regarding greenhouse gas emission, I think my answer to Brazil goes to you as well. Thank you, Japan, for your support during the task force meeting and so on. Regarding the target for NUE, the 50/90 is included in the proposal of the, as you know, there's 65 to 80 and then 50 to 90 are the best two scores that we attribute if you look at the proposal. But we can share the full proposal because it was only shared to members, but as you are observers, I think we can then share the final proposal. On biodiversity, yes, it's worth looking at it, definitely. We'll be happy to reach out.
Thank you, Valerie. Because we're running late, I'm gonna, any other questions you have for Valerie, please let her know at lunchtime. Again, thank you to Valerie and FAO for this process. It wasn't easy, but I think we have a good proxy. Again, I think following what Steve said, really everything is a proxy that we're measuring in some way or another. So, you know, it was collaborative. Everybody moved and gave a little. Is it perfect? No. But it gives us something. So thank you very much, Valerie. Steve, can you come back again?
Okay, so hi everybody. So I'm just going to give some quick feedback from the CCSA. So what I thought I would do is maybe start with who we are, just in case, because the IAEG are familiar with us, but so who are the CCSUN and the CCSA? So we are the custodian agencies. The CCS is all of the custodian agencies who belong to the UN. So the CCS is the chief statisticians of the UN system. We meet formally twice a year in plenary, but we have regular informal kind of consultations. Our job is to try and coordinate activities within the statistical system. So one of those tasks is, of course, the SDGs, but we discuss many other issues as well. The CCSA, which is the Committee for the Coordination of Statistical Activities, and I apologize for the name, I didn't make it up. That's basically the CCS plus all of the other international organizations. So that's the World Bank, the IMF, the OECD, Eurostat, the European Central Bank, the regional development banks, and other regional entities that have a significant role in statistical production. So that group together is the CCSA, and of course that's the group that I'm representing here today. So just a quick word. Sylvia was here yesterday, but I think she had to leave. So myself and Sylvia co-chair the CCS, which is the UN entities, and then myself and Haishan co-chair the CCSA. So it's my job to bridge the link between you guys and the custodians, but also to bridge the link between the UN and the wider international organizations. Because you probably think of us as a monolith, just as we probably think of you as a monolith, but in fact, we're all different. The UN has its own business to take care of, which is different to the wider. So that's a quick word about who we are. So Cara has invited us. So the CCSA met in Geneva the week before last. And one of our kind of standing agenda items is the SDGs. So we've been invited to give some feedback. So first of all, I just want to thank all of you, to thank the chairs of the IAEG for the very good cooperation that we've had in recent years. You just heard the example of FAO, where the IAG have really guided that process and helped us as custodians to understand how to present the information that you need. So just a quick word of thanks. So down to business, and what did we discuss 2 weeks ago? So on tier 2 indicators, we're fully supportive of the need to do a spring clean. We're now coming up to 10 years, so there are non-performing indicators. That said, as we said before, limited availability of data should not be the decisive factor, but I think that's been taken into account, as we saw from the criterion earlier. One very important point, which I alluded to earlier this morning, is really to avoid any attempts to remove politically sensitive indicators unless they're demonstrably non-performing. There are some countries who clearly are less enthusiastic about some indicators than others. That's fine. But as custodian agencies who are representing the UN, our job is to deliver on what the General Assembly asks for, whether it's palatable to all member states or not. The 90% target, I know there's nothing the IAG can do about this, that this is a target given to us, but just to say that the chief statisticians have some concerns about this target. So one is more a question about how to deal with the issue of relevance, because not all targets are relevant to all countries. There's a question about what does 90% mean? 90% of what? So what's the denominator? So there's a question there, but there was some concerns expressed as well about some anticipated consequences or even perverse incentives that might be generated by creating such a threshold. So again, there's nothing anybody in this room can do about this, but it's just to share our kind of thoughts. I think from the discussion, I think it's fair to say that we expect some substitutions and amendments to be presented to you. So I wrote this before I'd seen Cara's presentation, so I think it's clear what we need to do now. So thanks for all of those clarifications. But just to say that I think we will be bringing some change to some amendments. Transparency, the more the better. In particular, agencies and probably in many other parts of the community would like to be part of those discussions when the kind of relevant indicators are being discussed. That would be great if that's possible. A question around unofficial and model data. So there was some discussion around the thresholds. How will the IAG view indicators that are populated with a combination of reported and synthetic data? If there was some clarity on that would be really useful. And the same if we're using a combination of reported and unofficial data. So not necessarily modeled, but maybe using some other data. If there was any clarity on that in advance, that would be super helpful just to allow us to prepare. Proxy indicators, well, we just heard a live example. So again, the question is, can proxy indicators be used? Okay, this is an old slide. So while the point we were trying to make here really is, while proxy indicators, they're temporary. So it's just to reinforce that we would like to use the proxies while the principal indicator or the official indicator is still being populated. So just to take that into consideration during the comprehensive review. Resources, which isn't so much a question, but it harks back to maybe some of the earlier discussion. How together can we make a better case for investment in data systems and statistics? So this was a wider discussion about the SDGs, and I think Cara put it well when she said, look, we left ourselves on the hook for responsibility. So we took on this job without any significant increase in resources. That's something we would certainly like to avoid in the future. I imagine most of you would be the same. So it's maybe to have a discussion about what can we do as a community. And then again, just I think we had quite a lengthy discussion on this morning, but I think, you know, how do we prepare for the next development agenda? And we had some discussions at the break on that. Certainly the custodian agencies are open to any proposals that you have, and we certainly feel that we should work as a statistical community as a whole, so member states and custodian agencies together, to make the case for resources, but also to prepare for the next agenda. Again, we make ourselves available. If there's anything that we can do to facilitate discussions between NSOs and any other offices, just call. And we also encourage the reactivation of the regional consultation mechanisms, which I think the custodian agencies found very helpful in the first comprehensive review. C'est tout. Merci.
Thank you, Steve. I think he had more questions for the IAEG. But if you have any questions for Steve, please, or comments, please raise your flags. Sarah from Norway. Sarah from Norway.
Thank you. This is just to address the question of proxy indicators. I think maybe you should really perhaps take the chance to instead amend or replace the indicator that you have already. If you do have a proxy indicator that would work and is actually available, maybe that would be a better way, because there's not so much time left. So if we had that something that could actually work already, it might just be replaced with that in the review. Thanks.
Are there any other? Steve, you raised some really good questions for the IAEG that I think we need to go back and reflect on, particularly on the reported and modeled data. How does that work with the 40% threshold? Indicators that use official and unofficial data. I think we need to look at that. My own perspective is if it's the 40% and we can at least kind of validate it in terms of, yeah, we think that's good enough. I think that's fine. And then proxy indicators. I agree in part with Sarah. We want to be very careful. We don't want proxy indicators to become another set of indicators. So we need to be really strategic about proxy indicators. So please don't say, well, we'll have proxies, for all of the indicators for which we can't have a global estimate, because we're just creating a duplicate indicator proxy framework. So I don't think that would work. So we need to be super strategic on that. And I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, well, look, just on behalf again of all the international organizations, thanks again for your cooperation. And thanks to the chairs in particular and the Secretariat, because we have enjoyed, I think, a productive relationship in recent years. So we're super keen to continue that. So thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Okay, so we are moving on to item 8, data desegregation and inclusive data. And I think somebody else is going to take over chair duties. Pal is going to. Pal, can try to keep us on schedule. We're already cutting into your lunch break. So I'll just remind you, the more we fall behind, the less lunch you get.
Is it okay? Okay. Thank you. So we are in a rush in a way. So I would like to ask Yonggi and Sayonara for presenting building a global conceptual framework and a collaborative for citizen data.
Thank you, Chair. So I will start the petition on this citizen and generate data, and building a global conceptual framework and also a collaborator on citizen generated data. So I think we already heard. I'm not going to emphasize much more, but I just want to mention the importance of citizen-generated data. It's already been mentioned even previous pre the SDG period. So in the Secretary General report on the data revolution, already asked for the disparity words of public, private, and civil society data and the statistical provider need to be urgently brought together to build trust and confidence among the data users. And also, Secretary General also mentioned that the World Data Forum in April this year mentioned citizen-generated data allows people and communities to gather and take control of the data that are affecting their daily lives. And in the at the SDG summit, again, during the SDG mobilization days, and he attended this civil society meeting and mentioned that governance cannot do it alone. So we really need the civil society organizations and actions and leadership and encourage women, youth, indigenous community, and other groups to raise their voice and urge action to secure a sustainable future on planet. And also during this SDG summit, I think a lot of voice mentioned that we cannot use lack of data as an excuse for no action. And the data should also sit with the people and the community. So I also want to just emphasize in the SDG framework itself, it also indicates that the follow-up and review process at all levels should be open, inclusive, participatory, and transparent for all people, and will support the reporting by all stakeholders. And national review should draw on contribution from indigenous people, civil society, the private sector, and the other stakeholders. This is written in the SDG, in the 2030 agenda itself. So therefore, it's very important to make everyone's voice heard and also counted. So basically, we want to emphasize that human rights principle, nothing about us without us. And so the importance of citizen-generated data is a way to empower citizens and turn them to an agency for the change. And in addition, they can enhance the data availability, timeliness, quality, openness, and also disaggregation to provide the value for the vulnerable population group. So given that important issue and also the lot of like CSOs and the international community recognizes the importance of citizen-generated data. So UN Statistical Division organizes the first EGM on citizen data last year, like back to the IAEG meeting in Bangkok. And so at that meeting, we have agreed, it's participated by National Statistical Office, international agencies, CSOs, and some human rights organizations, and agreed that we need to identify a framework on citizen-generated data because there's a lot of concept definition and methodology used, and also to establish a collaborator on this area of work. And so we propose this a conclusion to the Statistical Commission and at the Statistical Commission in March, and we received a strong support from National Statistical Office to ask us to embark on this work to establish this collaborative and develop this conceptual framework. And also at the World Data Forum in April 2023, we launched this collaborative on citizen data. The next one. So the collaborative on citizen data, basically we have a form like initial steering committees, including UN Statistical Division, UN Women, and the Danish Human Rights Institution, Global Partnership for Sustainable Development, the World Bank. Open Data Watch Paris 21, and the International Civil Society Center, and also the stakeholder group of persons with disability. So we want to use this to collaborate to provide a space for sharing knowledge, resources, and experience in addressing the key challenges and issue topics, such as like concept definition, data quality issue, ethics, also area for capacity development, and also sustainability of those that will be identified in the collaborative work process. And also want to leverage the citizen data for policymaking and accountability. And we also want to use this collaborative to foster collaboration and also in-depth discussion among the experts from different community, NSO, CSO, academia, regional and international organization. And the collaborative also provide a platform for advocacy and mobilization resources for this area of work. And in addition, the collaborative want to identify some specific conceptual and methodology gaps. Please. So I will pass over because we, like 1 month ago in the same here, Copenhagen, beautiful Copenhagen, we had our second UN expert group meeting on citizen data and joined organized lovely partner of the Danish Institute for Human Rights. I'll pass to Saranara to tell you more about this meeting, a very exciting meeting.
Thank you, Yoongi. It is very exciting. It has been a very exciting year for Copenhagen, and we have had the chance of having so many very important statistical discussions with this community. The expert group meeting on citizen data, it had the objective of looking at this conceptual framework that we are aiming to achieve at the global level, which will be the primary guidance and light sort of say for us to try to get on the same page about what we are talking here when we are discussing citizen data. It was also trying to address how we are going to operationalize that when we bring it back to the country level. And finally, on what this collaborative on citizen data can actually do, how it can serve the member states, how it can serve the civil society organizations, the other actors in countries to bring this data to action. So if we go to the next slide, we were quite excited with 80 participants that came to Copenhagen for this meeting. And this is all just because we had to, at some point, say, we cannot take anymore, but the level of excitement that we saw quite surprised us because we still see this as such a taboo in a way when you're talking statistics and having that conversation to try to cross the gaps, to try to cross the bridge actually between the different actors working with this has been quite a long journey. Citizen data is there for a long time, but the communication between official statistics and what citizen-generated data can do is quite relatively new in trying to bring that to action. And we were very happy to see some examples mentioned here, for example, yesterday on geospatial data and also on other initiatives. We found it was important before getting into the discussion into of the EGM on the conceptual framework per se. We thought it was important to bring the country actors together and try to understand a little bit more of what experiences are already out there, what countries are doing. So we had a very nice chance of hearing from these countries that you see on the screen: Kenya, India, UK, Colombia, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Denmark, and looking at different actors. So it was quite special to be able to dialogue between any statistics office representative, a civil society, a national human rights institution, and see how these actors are already, in some special cases, bringing this into action and how others are struggling or in the process of getting there. We tried also to have some problem solving collectively, looking at when we are addressing sensitive data, can we use civil society or human rights institutions to be the primary contact point for that data, which are actors that can more easily build the trust with those that are affected by the data, for example. If we are thinking on developing national guidelines for how to then bring this conceptual framework to the ground, what are the steps that we need to take, what the different actors can do, and so on. So we had a very interesting experience with that. And I know this slide could have been 60 slides, but I convinced myself that if I put it all in one page, I would speak less. Let's see how that will go. But we just wanted to introduce you a little bit into this framework, what we are discussing here, which are the points that we have already started to build some understanding, if not some consensus on. So we looked at trying to get on the same page about the importance of citizen data, and Yongi has mentioned a lot of that, but it comes back, it circles back to some of the issues we're discussing here of filling data gaps, of dealing with that frustration of not being able to address and fulfill the ambitions of this humongous indicator framework, and particularly looking at the experiences of people, because one thing is to measure how many people are accessing the bus, and the other thing is to understand why some groups are not accessing the bus. And for those kind of issues, it can be quite relevant to deal, for example, with data produced by women on the fact that sometimes or some hours of the day, it might not feel safe to take the bus, or for persons with disabilities who are encountering some barriers on accessibility for accessing the public transportation. So bringing the experiences of people together with the numbers are quite relevant for fulfilling that big ambition and purpose of leaving no one behind. So this is a little bit of the importance of it. And we were looking also at some more specific issues of, can we describe which are the objectives that we are working with, and not to be descriptive of these are only the objectives that we recognize, but rather to inspire also. So we were discussing when we are accessing, monitoring access to services, the example that I used fits very well into that. When we are also assessing the implementation of rights or monitoring the implementation of rights, how also using this data to bring support for policymakers, to raise awareness, mobilization, for creating action, also for research. We have been discussing a lot on citizen data and the role of academia in this. We also looked at some principles that should guide the work on citizen data. So of course, aligning these experiences with existing principles, not least the fundamental principles of official statistics, the human rights principles, principles on citizen science as well, and so on. We looked into different types of initiatives and had very interesting discussions about the level of participation and engagement of actors. So there was this conversation about innovative ways also that some statistics offices and some institutions are using to try to collect data in different ways, and where do we consider that this then becomes citizen data, or where it's just an innovative approach, and then the level of engagement comes very closely to the heart of that, regardless of who is driving the initiative, if it's a civil society organization or if it's the NSO in specific cases. The level of engagement would really be the light to say, yeah, this is a really good example of citizen data, of an innovative approach that goes in that direction. We also discussed the roadmap to implement the conceptual framework. I know I'm probably talking too much because the slides have moved on, but just to conclude on this point, we discussed the roadmap to implement the conceptual framework. So we were looking at different aspects that would be important to take into consideration when planning the implementation of this framework at the country level. Inclusion, of course, building trust among the actors, institutionalizing the partnership came across as one very important way of having a sustainability in that experience, and so on and so forth. And finally, on the global, on the collaborative on citizen data and the role that this collaborative can have in helping to bridge this global discussions, which are already based on the national experiences, trying to galvanize also what happens at the regional levels, and make it as circular as possible in this exchange of experiences, but also to have a place where we can map initiatives, where we can create spaces for exchange on perhaps a regular basis, and so on. And I think it is quite beautiful to have this vision, especially when you consider that the demand that we are hearing from society of having more data is actually a great thing if we don't consider that the burden would be only in one shoulder. So again, the invitation to open up and work less in isolation, and to consider what success can actually look like if we work more broadly with others. Thank you.
So we just no, I just want to maybe just one couple more minutes about our next step and roadmap. So we have this Copenhagen framework, and the initial draft is developed, but we all want to look at how to restructure, refine, and based on the expert group meeting, and then proof of concept with national and local case study, and also develop advocacy and fundraising material. And we also want to implement this framework and want to pilot in some national roadmap in the countries, and including developing national toolkits for citizen data, and also conducting some mapping and baseline exercise on the data production at the national level, and also provide a technical assistance to some improve the capacity in the selected countries, and also work in the collaborative. So there's a call for members and from the NSO major groups and human rights institution, and also citizen science network researcher to contribute to this collaborative, and also carry out a stock-taking mapping exercise. So we want to establish a community practice. Quickly, I'm not going to go detail. Basically, from this year to next year, we will prepare a background document on the draft conceptual framework to the Statistical Commission and in the coming 2024 in March. And from March to March 2024 to March 2025, we will conduct a global consultation on this draft conceptual framework and carry out a case study, piloting, identify areas that need the methodology development. And we also want to organize another EGM, and possibly in June 2024, and present the final conceptual framework in March 2025. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I think we all agree that citizen data is quite important to fill all the gaps what we have in the framework. If you may have some questions, comments, go ahead. Lady in the back. Okay, sure.
Thank you so much. This is very, very interesting. And I'm so happy to see that there's more interest in citizen-generated data and engaging with communities. We at JIPS, we focus in our projects on community engagement, and we were able to gather through our country support projects a guide on how to engage with communities and the spectrum of community engagement. We're also implementing a project together with IOM in Burundi, focusing on collective intelligence and how to collect data through communities instead of employing enumerators to do the job. So we would like to contribute and be part of that process and conceptual framework development. Thank you. So I will reach out to you. Thank you.
Ecuador, please. Just the mic is coming. Here you are.
Thanks for the presentation. I have a reflection in general. A statistical office recognized the importance of exploring new sources that allow the closing of information gap for monitoring the SDGs. However, it's necessary to generate this space for exchange experience and good practices in which it's specified how this data can be from the treatment, complement the official statistics, ensuring its quality. Thank you.
There you are.
Thank you very much to the two presenters. Just to first express full support from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for this work stream, and congratulate all the NSOs and other organizations involved in this process. I think if we
were to sort of identify which of between national statistical offices or national human institutions are the poorest in terms of capacity. I think the competition will be hard. So I think from that, the importance of furthering collaboration between a national statistical office and national human rights institutions. So, and this linked to this concept of citizen-generated data, and also making this bridge with civil society organizations. To mention that there is a standard model for collaboration between National Statistical Office and national human institutions developed by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. There are 14 countries in the world that have signed this kind of agreement. Many in Africa, in Latin America, Asia, Europe to some extent, but I think there are more NSOs and NHRI that also need to enter into this kind of agreement, which is initiating a dialogue to produce maybe more relevant, collect more relevant data, access to groups that may not be covered by existing data collections, but also better use the data that already being collected. So there's a lot of value and also experience on which to build. So I think this process will be definitely key and critical for accelerating the implementation of the 2030 agenda, but also preparing future frameworks. Thank you.
Well, I collect one more question. If you have, yeah, there you are, Mele.
Thank you. This is just the question for the front or anybody here. For Tonga Pacific, we haven't done any citizen-generated data yet for the NSOs, but mine is just, has anybody done any citizen-generated data work regarding disaster-related statistics? All I need is a yes or no so I can come at you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Ladies, the floor is yours.
And thank you. Maybe I'll just start. We'll come and we'll talk to you to see how you can contribute. And because we already have on the collaborative website, we call for contribution. And this the same as we want to use a collaborative as a platform to share experience and best practices. So we all want to compile this good practice from countries. So and add more information there. And so it's coming. And yes, thanks, Nicholas, that we really worked close together with you and Saranala and from the human rights point of view. Lastly, I think there's some work that has done in terms of citizen-generated geospatial data related to disaster in some country, but I need to look into a particular country and then maybe get back to you on that.
Yeah, and thank you so much for both for the support and the comments there. I mean, you have said it here a few times now that the meaning of the SDGs has been put on the shoulders of the statistical community by defining these indicators. And I think this comes with a really great responsibility, and it just makes it even more urgent to open up and reach out to try to address the meaning of leave no one behind as a jargon, but really how people are experiencing those targets and those goals. And this will be really good inspiration. I think it's very timely that we are starting it now as a movement, not as individual initiatives, to try to get into the next agenda with a new mindset of how to work with this. And I really hope that will be the case then. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. If you have no more questions, thank you. Just an assistance from the Secretariat. Are we going to finish the whole morning session now? Or?
12:30.
Sorry?
One
more. Okay. Okay. So the next one is, thank you very much. Going to be Natalie Ball from the expert group of refugees, IDPs, and statelessness statistics. Natalie, there you are.
So we try to limit this number of questions, so we don't encourage them. Okay.
Okay, thank you. It's never good to be just before lunch, right? But I can blame Steve, right? But maybe it's a good thing because you can all spend lunch break discussing my presentation and nothing else. So let me be provocative enough to make that the case. I know that some of you know who I am and know the expert group on refugee, IDP and statelessness statistics, but not everybody. So I am going to start off just with a quick recap of the group, but super quick. Apologies to those of you who are actively engaged in the group. You can quickly send an email. I'm going to focus a bit on the 12 priority SDG indicators that have been originally identified by EGRIS but endorsed by the IAEG, and speak a little bit about implementation of the statistical recommendations also associated with producing data for SDG indicators on these populations, and then end with a quick draw your attention to some newly available resources that may be helpful. So the expert group on refugee, IDP and statelessness statistics that I speak on behalf of, I'm heading the secretariat of the group that is hosted actually here in Copenhagen by UNHCR. We were established by the UN Statistical Commission, so we've got a mandate from the Commission that dates back to 2016. We are currently moving into the last year of our third mandate. So we've had a kind of progressively increased responsibility from the first years where we focused on kind of standard development, so developing international statistical recommendations on refugee statistics, on statistics of those who are internally displaced in their countries, and most recently, earlier this year, endorsed the Commission on statelessness statistics. So these are the three sets of now internationally endorsed recommendations that orient all the work of the group, whether that is in terms of our advocacy activities, our technical support activities, and really everything we do. We have 57, at the moment, our membership, and it's growing all the time, so I always have to update this slide. We have 57 countries that are members of the group and 36 different international and regional organizations. Our membership is always open, and we say yes to everyone who would like to join. Our mandate now, I've mentioned the three sets of recommendations that orientate our work, but we now focus very much on promoting their use so they become more than just the paper they're written on, and of course supporting their implementation primarily at country level, but more and more through regional engagement. This is not, the clicker's not clicking. Thank you. Should I click for this? Yeah. In this way, the expert group is directly responding to challenges identified by countries in relation to statistics and data on forcibly displaced and stateless populations. On the one hand, this data is primarily still produced through operational or accessed through operational data sources, primarily produced through the work of humanitarian agencies and assistance, and thereby, of course, of mixed quality, given its primary purpose. There was, before EGRIS existed, the lack of an agreed upon statistical framework guiding statistics and harmonization of statistics on these population groups. Of course, those agreed frameworks are now in place, but they're still new. They're not yet commonly used, so there is still an issue there. And these populations, as I alluded to in my comment earlier, and very much relevant to the preceding presentation, are often excluded from national data production systems. So they are often the groups that still remain invisible in the context of the SDGs. Varying levels of statistical capacity and or closely associated with that political will to address this issue, are also daily challenges, but also opportunities the group faces. We're working collaboratively with our members and have kind of set up an organizational structure and a secretariat to support the engagement of partners in everything that we do. So this is very much not just a global group, but we very meaningfully engage and do our best to provide every opportunity for that to all of our members. In summary, why are these three sets of recommendations important? What's their significance? Why does this matter? Some may be asking. They represent the world's first internationally endorsed statistical frameworks for these population groups. Yeah, before there was no common definition on statistics for refugees, internally displaced populations, and stateless persons. They define who should and who should not. In many cases, it's a who should not be included in the statistics. They provide recommendations on not only stock data, but also and population counts, but also in terms of what characteristics should be measured. And this is, of course, the kind of key connection here to the SDGs and many socioeconomic characteristics and indicators. They also provide a lot of recommendations, and the resources I'll come to in a minute complement these to provide guidance to countries and other stakeholders supporting countries on how they can be incorporated in national statistical systems and data production processes. So it looks a lot on how to adjust and include, how to adjust existing data sources, how to include populations that are yet to be included in the core data sources that you're all working with. Oh, sorry. So that's why they're significant. They have also, and through the recommendations themselves, but also the group's work, identified 12 different SDG indicators that have been prioritized for forced displacement, and an additional 4 that have been kind of added to that list of 12 with a focus on statelessness with the recently endorsed recommendations earlier this year. These are, of course, very important to remind the group, but they're also providing, now that we're working very much on the supporting implementation of the recommendations, they're also providing good orientation, and we have some good stories to tell. At the Secretariat, we're aiming to, we have a global survey, so we aim to kind of to monitor the progress of how the recommendations are being used by countries and institutions. And as of the end of last year, we identified a total of 90 different examples of direct implementation of the refugee and the IDP recommendations. We will start this year also monitoring the statelessness recommendations, and our global survey recently closed, so I know but can't tell you yet the new number. But I think more importantly is how countries are using these recommendations in their national systems, which are the kind of red color on the screen here, and some really exciting new opportunities. I've selected a couple of countries to flag on the side there, where countries such as Central African Republic, Uganda, Ethiopia, but a long list of many others are about to launch, new data sets, have successfully included these populations in national household surveys, in census activities, and thereby producing SDG-aligned forced displacement data. One upcoming example comes from the Central African Republic, where the National Statistical Office there is, I think in the next month or so, will launch the report, but some really interesting results coming out where you can compare those who are internally displaced in the countries with the national average, with the non-displaced population, how they fare, for example, in relation to SDG 1.2.1, but many other SDG indicators as well. 3 super quick 1 minute new resources that I wanted to draw your attention to in case they're useful, and all of them you can find more information online, so I don't need to dwell on them and keep you from lunch. The first is a compiler's manual. So the recommendations are, of course, high level in that sense to remain relevant for all countries and for a longer period of time. But we have developed a compiler's manual that has also recently been revised that provides more kind of hands-on guidance. So, okay, we want to include in our next mixed survey, okay, we want to include in our next census, or we want to improve how we're using administrative data sources to produce statistics on these population groups. How do we go about that in practice? The compiler's manual is a useful tool in this regard. We have also developed and launched earlier this year, developed in collaboration with UNCEAP and launched earlier this year, an e-learning. We know that not everyone has time to read a 200-page dense statistical document. So we've also launched an e-learning to make the content of the recommendations more accessible. And that was launched earlier this year and is now being updated to also include work on statelessness. So it'll be kind of relaunched, the enhanced version, early next year. accessible online, self-paced e-learning. So please do make colleagues and friends and family, if that's relevant, aware of this resource. We have to complement this, and we know this is, a fast developing field, not only in terms of technological advancements, but also, as countries start to use the recommendations, different challenges come up. They're the first set of endorsed recommendations. We're learning lessons. We're trying to capture those lessons for any future revisions that might be needed. So in this sense, we're trying to also invest in research and experience sharing that results in kind of thematic papers, the production of thematic papers. One to draw your attention to, as I think is particularly relevant in terms of inclusive approaches to the Sustainable Development Goal indicator reporting, is a paper recently published on how to best identify these population groups within existing national household survey tools. So not only question formulation, but placement in questionnaires and everything you really need to know and think about when taking this work forward. And we are currently developing an SDG-focused paper, which is looking at the 12 priority indicators, or the 14 priority indicators now, what are the data sources that are used to produce these? Are there any specific adjustments made? In most cases, there's not that much to better include these population groups in the specific indicators mentioned. So this is an upcoming paper, hopefully later this year. We'll share it with you in time for your comprehensive review next year. Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I was very quick, but I'm here for the rest of the day.
Thank you, Natalia. Well, since we are a bit behind the schedule, we'll have now the lunch break. If you may have some questions, and Natalia, please find her during the lunch break. And we are going to meet here in 45 minutes, 1:15. Thank you.